Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here at SKS Props, and this is part 3 in my Gears of War armor build series. If you have not checked out parts 1 and 2, we went over how to make the under armor, how to bulk out a good chunk of the front, and in this video we're going to be detailing a lot of the back. In the video after this, it's all going to be about the top. The whole reason I'm breaking this video series down into multiple videos is because I don't want you to become overwhelmed. There are a ton of details in Gears armor, but if you take it detail by detail and video by video, I promise you in the end, you'll have a really nice set of Gears armor for yourself. Now, this of course is made all out of my HD foam, which you can find over at Blick Art Materials. We've got a lot to cover in this video, so let's go ahead and get started. With the front bulked out, I'm going to start to work on the lower back, and I'm going to add a strip of 10mm foam right along here. This strip is glued into place while the foam is curved. This is going to help the armor conform to my back better. To create a layered look on the lower back, part A is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. This is also going to be glued into place while the foam is curved. With slight gaps on either side, we're going to finish off the bottom using part B. Part B is also traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. After being rounded over with a rotary tool and heat sealed, it can be glued to the bottom of part A. The overlapping foam on either side is marked and then glued onto part B. A belt will go in here later on, but we'll address that with final details. Go ahead and take part C, which is going to make up the bulk of this back section. This template is going to be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam. Now notice there are two marks on my template. There's a glue mark and a spacer mark. Contact cement is going to be applied and glued up to this lower mark. Because of the strain this foam is going to be under, I glue some strips of 2mm foam over these seams. The top mark for the spacer is where we're going to glue in part D. Part D is also cut out of 10mm foam, but it has 20-degree angles on either side. Once glued into place, this is going to separate these two halves while also giving it a distinct curve in the middle. Part E is also traced and cut out of 10mm foam and glued at the top. And it's pretty cool, with both these in place, it creates a really nice compound curve in the back. Part F is going to help reinforce this curve, and it's also cut out of some 10mm foam. This piece is going to be rounded over on both sides with a rotary tool before being heat sealed and glued into place. To fill the gap at the bottom of this back armor, part G is going to be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam 2 times. Before being glued to the under armor, I go ahead and bevel all of the edges, as well as removing some of the foam from part G. This piece is going to line up right with the middle of the under armor, and I go ahead and mark both sides. Because of the size of this piece, contact cement is going to be used for the majority, and then Bob Smith superglue is used along the perimeter. This double adhesive method is important because it creates a stronger bond, but also because if I need to add more heat in the future, heat will not affect the superglue. Because of my original template, I now have some excess foam on the under armor that's in the way. And the thing that's great about foam is I can just mark that with a pencil, cut away the excess, and then round that over with my rotary tool. Now I'm going to head and mark the placement of the under armor connecting to the back panel. Contact cement and superglue are once again used, and these two halves can be firmly pressed together. Notice here that only the sides are going to connect. There's actually going to be a gap in the middle. Part H is going to be a 10mm round dowel, sanded flat on the back side before being glued to the middle. Part I is going to butt up to this dowel, and it's going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. This piece is going to be placed about 3/8 inch from the bottom. And after being beveled and heat sealed, this can be glued onto part C. Parts J and K are going to detail this section. Part K is going to be made out of 10mm foam, and part J is going to be made out of 6. The height difference between these two pieces gives a nice detail, and these pieces can be glued together. I like to mark placement and attach one side, and then I'll try to match that as close as possible to the other. With those sections complete, we can now trace and cut out part L out of some 6mm foam 2 times. This piece is also going to be slightly beveled all the way around before being heat sealed. When placing this piece, it should line up right with the top of part I. The big thing to note here is the 2 top sections of part L do not get glued down. These are going to attach to added shoulder straps in the next video. Part M can now also be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. Marcus's back consists of a lot of different layers, but note here that I'm marking all of them before gluing them into place. This makes sure that I leave proper spacing all around these pieces. It's more important that the outside spacing on these is correct, because the inside is going to be covered up with additional details later on. And again, part M and part L do get glued together, but they do not get glued down. These again are going to attach to other pieces in the next video. And feel free to pause the video at any time to see how I've spaced these sections out. He has raised details on either side of his back, which are going to be made up of part N and part O. Part N is going to be cut out of 2 pieces of stacked 10mm foam. Part O is going to be traced and cut out of 6mm foam. Part O is going to be attached to the top of part N, making sure that the outside edge is flush. These are going to be marked and glued to the edge of part M. And notice how the arm that goes in lines up with the top of part M. The end of the arm is glued down, and I can pull the foam up to give it this raised detail. Now we can start flushing out Marcus's spine. We're going to take parts P and Q and transfer those onto some 10mm foam. With these 2 pieces beveled and heat sealed, they can be glued together before being glued to the back. While I'm figuring out placement for this piece, I'm constantly checking it with part R to make sure I have enough room. Part R is traced and cut out of some 6mm foam, and this piece should fit right up next to parts P and Q. Now if any of these don't make a tight seam, feel free to cut customized pieces for your build. Part S is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam. This is also beveled and heat sealed before being glued to the spine. For placement, part S should almost line up with the edge of part P. As of right now, we have a large gap in the middle, so let's work on covering that up. Part T is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam, the very bottom of it being cut at a slight angle. This angle will help it sit flush with the back panels. Part U is going to be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam. With this piece beveled and heat sealed, the 2 part T sections can be glued to either side. Part V can now be cut out of some 6mm foam, and this is going to cover the gap at the bottom. Feel free to cut away any additional foam. To give it some additional surface area, I glue some blocks of 10mm foam to the inside. This entire section can now be glued to the middle of the spine. And for placement, notice how it lines up with the bottom of part S. For the pipes that are going to run into this section, I'm going to be using some 15mm round dowels. These are going to be cut to 1 3/4 inches with the top being cut at an angle. To make sure that they bond well, I spray some accelerant onto the back before gluing these into place. The accelerant and superglue technique is also applied to the sides of this section. To detail these out, I'm going to take some very thin strips of foam and wrap them around the dowels. Some 2mm strips are also placed around the base of each pipe. A longer 2mm strip is going to be glued around the outside of part R and along the bottom of part Q. But if you just want to keep it simple and you don't want to add all these details, that's fine, it's your armor. But I will say that these types of details will really pop later on when we add paint. Here I'm going to add some additional strips around the pipes just to help match the game a little better. Part W is going to go on the side here, and it's going to be made of 2 pieces of stacked 10mm foam. Once these pieces have been glued to either side, a strip of 2mm foam can be glued on top. This adds another layer of interest but also helps cover that central seam. Part X is going to be made out of some 6mm foam, and this piece is going to cap the top of this back panel. Part Y is going to be traced and cut out of some 10mm foam. Now it is possible that some of the angles on these pieces may need to be changed for your build for it to fit properly. Part Z is going to cap this entire section, and it's going to be made of 3 pieces of stacked 10mm foam. Superglue is added and this stacked piece of foam can be firmly pressed into place. Just like before, a strip of 2mm foam is going to run across this entire section, covering all of those seams. As a bump out on this back piece, I'm going to trace around part AA. I could then remove the 2mm foam underneath. Part AA is going to be traced and cut out of some 6mm foam, and then these pieces can be glued to either side. To cap off these sections and add a little bit of detail, small strips of 2mm foam could be added to the tops of part AA. The front and the back have been bulked out pretty good. Now we do have additional details to add later on, but next up we're going to be working on the top. So you can see all of the details that I put into the back of my Gears of War chest armor. And again, there's free PDF files available for all of this over on my website that you can download in case you would like to make your own. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram. Reason is I've started doing Maker Mondays once again, and I just might feature your work. Now be sure to swing back by for part 4. We're going to be tackling the top of this armor. Until then, build your best with the best. HD Foam.